I found cameras in my walls and my brother had the remote the whole time. My name is Andrew, and until a year ago, I thought I was losing my mind. I'm 27 now, living alone in a small rented house outside of Portland. Quiet place, decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy. I moved here after a bad breakup and needed time to clear my head. But what started as a fresh start turned into a descent into absolute madness. It began with small things. My toothbrush would be wet when I hadn't used it. TV would be on a different channel when I came home. At first, I thought I was just forgetful, sleep deprived, stressed. But then, food started disappearing from the fridge. A beer would be missing. A slice of pizza gone. I live alone. No pets. No girlfriend. No friends stopping by. I even started marking fruit with a Sharpie to track it. And sure enough, things kept vanishing. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe I was sleepwalking. Maybe I was drunk and forgot. But I wasn't drinking. I wasn't losing time. I was just scared. One night I woke up at 3:12 a.m. to the sound of footsteps. I froze. They were soft. Deliberate. Coming from the kitchen. My hot pounded so loud I thought it would give me away. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed and crept out of my room. Nothing. No one in the kitchen. Doors locked. Windows shut. I checked every corner of the house. It was like whoever or whatever had been there had vanished. The next day, I installed a motion detector in the hallway and cameras inside the living room and kitchen. I didn't tell anyone. Not my mom. Not my brother. Especially not my brother. I should probably explain that last part. My brother, Tyler, is a genius, but also a sociopath. He's always had this way of getting inside people's heads, teachers, girls, even our parents. Growing up, he'd do things just to see how people would react. Mess with people for fun. When I was 13, he convinced me our parents had been replaced by identical clones. I didn't sleep for a week. He laughed for days. I hadn't talked to him in months. Last I heard, he was working on some weird human behavior research for a startup in California. I didn't think much of it until things got worse. The cameras picked up nothing, but I still heard the footsteps. Then, one night, the footage was gone. Not corrupted, deleted. Only one person knew the password besides me, and I hadn't spoken to him since Mom's funeral. That's when I realized this wasn't a haunting. It wasn't a break-in. It was him, Tyler, and I had no idea what he was truly capable of. After the footage vanished, I changed all the locks, the Wi-Fi password, even the router itself. I formatted the hard drive where the recordings were stored. I bought a second hidden camera, one I didn't even connect to the cloud. I was done playing games. But the next morning, I woke up to all the lights in the house turned on. Every single one. Closet lights. The attic. Even the porch light I never used. That might sound trivial, but I live alone. And I turned them all off before bed. I called Tyler. It rang twice. Then straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I couldn't prove anything, not yet. But I knew no, felt it was him. He was always like this. Not direct. Subtle. Psychological. He once locked me in a crawl space for 6 hours just to see if I'd create an imaginary friend. Now it felt like he was conducting some new experiment and I was the subject. I went to the police. I told them someone was breaking in, possibly hacking my devices. They took a report, but without physical evidence, they couldn't do much. They asked if I had a roommate. I said no. They asked if I had a history of mental illness. I said no, but I could tell from the look in the officer's eyes that he didn't believe me. The next few days were quiet. I almost convinced myself I was going crazy, until I found the camera. Not mine. A small black dot behind a vent in the living room. I'd only noticed it because the light inside blinked just for a second when I turned on the TV. I pulled the vent cover off. There it was, a miniature pinhole camera. Wired. Old school. Not something you'd find on Amazon. Something custom built. Suddenly I felt sick. Violated. Exposed. I tore through the house. I found 2 more, one behind a bookshelf, another in the ceiling above my shower. I called a private security company. They came out the next day, swept the house. Final count? 9 cameras. 9. All hidden in places I never thought to look. All hardwired into the walls. None using Wi-Fi. Whoever installed these, the tech said, knew what they were doing. They traced the wires to a small box in the attic, cleverly concealed behind insulation. It had a local storage drive and worse, a cellular module, meaning it had been sending data somewhere else the whole time. The tech handed me the drive, and that's when I saw it. A sticker. One of those old barcode-style ones you see in research labs or startups. It read, Property of Tylexa Neurobehavioral Research Device 21A. Tylexa. Tyler's startup. That son of a bitch hadn't just been watching me. He had turned my life into a lab experiment. I stared at that label for what felt like hours. Tylex and neurobehavioral research. I remember Tyler bragging about it once during a rare phone call after our mother's funeral. We're going to change the way the brain works, he said. People won't even know they're being tested. I thought he was just being dramatic. Typical Tyler. But now I knew he meant me. He'd made me a test subject, and not through consent, not through science. Through surveillance. Through fear. Through manipulation. I brought the storage drive to a friend of mine, Alex, who works in cybersecurity. I told him the basics. I think I'm being spied on, I said, and asked if he could recover any files from it. He took one look and whistled. Encrypted, military grade, you piss off someone in the government. No, I said. Just my brother. He laughed. I didn't. Alex spent the night digging, decrypting, running scripts. Finally, he cracked part of it. Files weren't just video footage, they were logs. Detailed logs. With timestamps. Labels. Comments. Subject is exhibiting high anxiety. Nighttime pacing detected. Attempting light exposure protocol next week. Subject did not respond to fridge manipulation. Will escalate to auditory stimuli. Chemistry malfunctioned. Note to self, replace lens before next observation cycle. The worst part. Every file was labelled subject 2AM. My initials. I wasn't just being watched. I was filed. Catalogued. Like a fucking lab rat. That night, I drank a half bottle of whiskey and barely slept. I kept thinking about every private moment I thought I'd had in the past few months. Crying. Pacing. Showering. And somewhere, Tyler was watching it all. Not just watching, documenting it. I confronted my dad the next morning. He didn't answer my call the first time. When he finally picked up, I asked straight out, "Did you know Tyler was spying on me?" Silence. Then a sigh. I told him not to use family. What? He explained, slowly, that Tyler's company had trouble getting long-term behavioural data from clinical volunteers. So he started testing on people he knew. Just for baseline readings, Dad said. He told me it wasn't harmful. Dad, he installed cameras in my shower. More silence. I hung up. That was the moment something inside me flipped. This wasn't just an invasion of privacy. This was abuse. Psychological warfare. Tyler was playing God with my life. So I made a decision. I wouldn't go to the police. I wouldn't sue. I would give Tyler exactly what he wanted. I would play his game, and I'd tear it apart from the inside. I started with a lie. I called Tyler from a burner phone. I didn't expect him to pick up it, but he did. First ring. Hello? Tight, I said, my voice shaking. I need help. He was quiet for a moment. Then that familiar coldness returned. Andrew? Yeah, I said, injecting just the right amount of panic. I think I'm losing it. I haven't been sleeping. I'm seeing things, hearing things. He paused again. Then, come to the lab. That was the first confirmation. He didn't ask questions, didn't pretend. Just offered the spider's web. And I walked straight in. Tylex's facility was in a glass and steel building on the outskirts of San Jose. It looked like any other tech startup, slick, minimal, full of smiling young people in lanyards and hoodies. Tyler met me in the lobby. Same fake smile. Same empty eyes. He looked cleaner than usual, press shirt, manicured nails. Like a man playing a role. Glad you came, he said. You made the right choice. He led me through 2 layers of security and into a small white room with a chair, a mirror, and a tablet. There were no windows. You're going to sit here and talk to the AI, he said. Nothing invasive, just a conversation. Why? To map your thought patterns. You've got a fascinating brain, Andy. You always have. That was the moment I knew he'd never felt bad about any of it. To him, I wasn't his brother. I was a project. So I played along. For 2 weeks, I came in every day. Sat in the white room. Let the AI ask me questions. I answered like I was unraveling a paranoid, angry, scared. Sometimes I cried in queue. They loved it. But what they didn't know is that every night I was digging into their systems. With Alex's help, we hacked into the lab's internal drives. We found files on 16 other subjects, people from Tyler's past. Ex-girlfriends. A former professor. Even our childhood neighbour, Miss Cess Green, who disappeared mysteriously last year. They'd all been part of the study. Most had no idea. Some had filed police reports. A few were labelled as terminated trials. One was marked deceased. I copied everything. Names. Footage. Documents. Experiment protocols. I had terabytes of data. Enough to destroy Tylexa. But I didn't stop there. One night, I stayed late. I told Tyler I was feeling suicidal. He looked thrilled. He left me alone for data integrity. I snuck into his office. He used the keycard I lifted from his assistant, plugged in a thumb drive and ran the worm Alex had written. It mirrored everything on his personal drive to a hidden cloud folder. Then I saw something I wasn't ready for. A video file labelled Subject 1 I opened it. It was our mother. She was sitting in the same white room I'd been in, crying, asking Tyler why he was doing this, telling him he needed help. The video ended with her screaming. And then silence. Tyler's voice, cold and flat. Then session. That was the moment I knew. He didn't just experiment on me. He might have killed her. I stared at the screen, unable to move, as my world shattered in front of me. Mom. The one person who'd tried to keep our family together. The one person who'd seen Tyler for what he was and still tried to protect him. And Tyler, he'd killed her. He'd used her just like he used me. All for his sick experiments. I couldn't breathe. I was shaking, my vision blurring as I replayed her final moments. Her scream. Her begging. She'd been begging for her life. Tyler had been testing on her too. He'd manipulated her, just like he had with me. But with her, he had crossed the line. There was no doubt anymore. He was capable of anything. And I was next. But I wasn't going down without a fight. I gathered myself. I couldn't stay in that room any longer. I couldn't let him know I'd seen the video. Not yet. Not until I was ready. I backed out of his office, wiping my face with the sleeve of my jacket. I needed to act normal. I needed him to think he still had control over me. I returned to the white room for my next session. Tyler was waiting. His smile was like ice. So, he said casually, "How are you feeling?" "Better," I lied. "I think I was just stressed. Work's been crazy." He nodded, his eyes gleaming. I could tell he was enjoying this. Watching me unravel. Watching me pretend. But the more I sat there, the clearer it became. I was no longer a victim. I was his undoing. I couldn't trust the police. They'd never believe me. But I had something he didn't access. I had files. Evidence. Data that could bring him and his company crashing down. So I played my part. I continued the sessions. But I stopped playing by his rules. Every night, I went home and uploaded everything to a cloud server. I was collecting my own archive of proof that Tyler's empire was built on lies, abuse, and murder. And then, I found something else. A folder buried deep within his files. It was labelled Protocols Data. It had detailed instructions for future experiments. And in it, I found a timeline of his next steps. Tyler wasn't just observing people anymore. He was preparing to manipulate entire populations using his AI, his cameras, his systems to control behavior on a global scale. And worst of all, he was planning to use me as his ultimate test. I wasn't just a subject. I was the final phase. The control test. And he wasn't going to stop until I was dead. I had to act fast. I began to prepare. I had everything I needed: the data, the video footage, the files. But before I could go to the authorities, before I could expose him, I needed one final thing. I needed him to know I was onto him. I needed him to see it in my eyes before I disappeared. I called him one last time. He picked up on the second ring. "Tyler," I said, my voice steady. "Yeah?" He sounded smug. "I know what you did to Mom." There was a pause. A long one. And then his voice cold as ice answered. "I'm not finished with you yet, Andrew." That was the moment I knew. There was no turning back. It was time for me to disappear, to become a ghost. But this time, it was Tyler who would be left behind. This time, I was going to destroy him. I spent the next few days in a blur of adrenaline and fear. The plan I'd formulated was risky, too risky. But there was no choice. Tyler had already crossed every line. He'd made sure of that. I started by pulling every thread I could. I wiped the cloud drive clean, deleting everything I'd backed up. Every file, every video, every log. I didn't care about the risks anymore. I knew Tyler would try to cover his tracks, but what he didn't know was that I'd also copied the files to a completely secure server overseas, one he couldn't touch. But it wasn't just about exposing him. Tyler was a master of manipulation, a sociopath who knew how to get into people's heads. He'd already turned me into an experiment. I wasn't going to be another victim. If I wanted to survive, I had to make him think he had lost. The next step was to destroy his lab from the inside. I couldn't just walk in and burn it to the ground. That would be too obvious. But I knew exactly how to hit him where it hurt. I planted a virus in Tylex's internal systems, something that would scramble their data and completely erase his research. It wouldn't just take down the company. It would ruin him. I made sure it was set to activate the moment I left the building. But before I did, I visited the last place I needed to go, Tyler's personal office. It was just as cold and sterile as I remembered it. His desk was immaculate, his chair the center of the room, the dim lights casting long shadows against the walls. This was his kingdom. But now it was about to crumble. I uploaded the virus. Then, I took the one thing I could, a small black box sitting on his desk. It was one of his personal devices, something he'd used to monitor his experiments. I didn't know how it worked, but I wasn't about to leave it behind. Tyler's footsteps echoed down the hall. I could hear him coming. He sensed something was wrong. The man was sharp, but not sharp enough. I quickly slipped into the hallway and out the back door. No one saw me. No one would. By the time they figured out what had happened, I'd be gone. I didn't go home. I didn't go anywhere familiar. I couldn't trust anyone anymore. Not even Alex. I watched from a distance as the world Tyler had built began to fall apart. Tylexa was hit with a massive data breach. The virus took down the entire network, and within hours, the media was reporting it. The company stock plummeted. Investors pulled out. Tyler was left scrambling, trying to save face, while the world started to question the ethics of his research. But the true horror was that the research wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. Tyler had been manipulating people's lives without their consent. He'd crossed boundaries no one should ever cross. And yet, the worst part, I wasn't even sure he realized the depth of his own monstrosity. For a while, I stayed in hiding. I watched him from the shadows, seeing how he tried to salvage his empire. I couldn't help but feel a twisted satisfaction. He thought he'd won. He thought he had control. But in the end, it was me who destroyed everything he had built. I never spoke to him again. I don't know where he is now, and honestly, I don't care. But there's one thing I know for sure. Tyler didn't just ruin people's lives. He ruined his own. And I made sure he'd never hurt anyone again.